Hello friends, welcome into the Cowboys Report presented by the Guild. I am Tom Downey. Follow me on Twitter at WhatGoingDowney for more Cowboys coverage. We're going to start things off today with my mailbag, much awaited, especially for all of you on YouTube. Well, here it is at long last. Blame David Irving for pushing back the mailbag time frame. First question from Ultra Micro Budget, great username, asks, is the passing game bad is the secondary good? This was based on the report that the Cowboys offense in terms of the passing game was struggling, and the answer is a little bit of both. Look, it is early in OTAs right now, in OTAs and minicamp, excuse me, and that does tend to weight more towards the defense who's had more chemistry, they've played longer, but I do think this young secondary is very talented right now, so don't panic quite yet on the passing game, but do feel a little bit good about this young and promising secondary. Quinn wants to know, could the Cowboys win the division this year? And yes, they absolutely could, especially if things break their way with injuries and whatnot. But I don't think it's the most likely outcome. Here's my projected NFC East standings. 12-4 for Philly. A bit of a comeback down to earth year. Cowboys go 10-6. And I don't buy either the Redskins or the Giants this year. And I'll make note for Washington and New York and for the Cowboys as well. They play the NFC South and the AFC South in the crossover games this year. That's going to make for a tougher schedule. I think the Cowboys will be in the playoff mix, but even at 10-6, I don't know if that's enough to get them in the playoffs this year. As producer Brett points out, that's not always the most common thing, but I think the NFC is absolutely loaded this year. That could come back and hurt the Cowboys in the end. But let me know where you think the Cowboys will finish in the NFC East this year. Give me a heart for a division win, a like for finishing in second, a laughy face for a third-place finish, and a wow face for dead last. Then that means Jason Garrett is for sure fired. All right, Jordan wants to know that, kind of responding back to the 5 free agents the Cowboys could sign, that the Cowboys could trade for, or that which DT could the Cowboys trade for this year? He thinks they're going to address the position. It's tough to make potential trade options because we haven't hit training camp yet. I'll throw out one name in particular as we take a look here at the Cowboys depth chart at DT because it's just not very good right now. How about a guy like Dominique Easley? Now, there are a bunch of injury concerns there, but the Rams right now have Sue and Donald and Brockers. If they can get something back for Easley, I could see a trade there. But I think the more likely outcome is you see someone like a Brian Price, a bottom-of-the-roster guy, can help out the Cowboys, though, and only cost a late-round pick, like a 7th. I think Easley might cost more. Next up from Bray, asks, will the Cowboys sign a veteran quarterback like a Matt Moore or a Mark Sanchez? First off, I like both those guys, but I don't foresee the Cowboys bringing in a veteran quarterback as we sit right now. Dak is your starter, without a doubt. No more comments about that one, guys. Then it's Cooper Rush and Mike White battling for that number 2 role. We'll talk more about White later on in the show. And then Dalton Sturm is your classic camp arm. I don't expect either guy to be signed. Matt Moore was not very good last year, though there is some familiarity there. And with Mark Sanchez, you know, Matt Moore, I think because the Cowboys drafted Mike White, it kind of put the kebab in that one there. It doesn't make any more sense for Dallas to go sign Matt Moore. And then as for Mark Sanchez, he's got a PED suspension, so it doesn't make sense there either. Bray also wants to know, could the Cowboys sign a Jeremy Maclin or a Michael Floyd or Eric Decker? And again, I don't think so, with the caveat, unless there are a bunch of injuries, then things could change. And the Cowboys did have some interest in Jeremy Maclin before they signed Dallin Hearns, but with Hearns on board, the Cowboys don't have a need for Maclin, who, by the way, is not the player he was with the Philadelphia Eagles. He has very much fallen off a cliff in recent years in terms of production. And then for the Cowboys, with wide receiver depth chart, I know there aren't a lot of top-end number 1 guys, but they've got a lot of decent enough bodies. Hearns and Beasley, Gallup are locks there. T-Will is maybe a lock given his contract and potential suspension. Deontay Thompson is there as well. You got Tavon playing a receiver-halfback hybrid role. So I don't think it makes sense for Dallas to bring in a veteran wide receiver right now. Back to Jordan. He wants to know if I think Deontay Thompson is being underrated. And I am not that high on Thompson, so yes, I suppose I could be underrating Thompson here. I think he's going to play a Bryce Butler type role as a deep threat. He's not going to get 8 catches a game. He's going to get a handful at most and be that deep threat. Now, the Cowboys last year, even with Butler, T-Will was not the deep threat. They didn't have that guy that could really stretch the field deep. Thompson could be that player, but he's not guaranteed a roster spot right now. He has to beat out one guy in particular, namely Cedric Wilson, who I like quite a bit. So Thompson could be the guy that makes a big impact in 1 week, and then the next week kind of goes by the wayside, and his impact might not be felt necessarily in the stat sheet each week if he's helping to stretch the field. Matt S. wants to know, what if David Irving has 8+ sacks? Would you re-sign him then? Before I get to that question, I want to remind you all, today's show is brought to you by The Guild. Visit stayguild.com for 15% off your next stay, be it in Dallas, Austin, a whole bunch of other areas. They're kind of like a luxury Airbnb. Again, that's promo code ChatSports for 15% off your next stay. As for Irving, if he actually puts up great numbers, I think that actually hurts the Cowboys' chances of re-signing him because Irving wants to get paid. He's made that very clear through various reports and comments. His number one focus is not loyalty to the Cowboys, not that it should be. It's to get paid and get that money flowing in because he's taken very much a team-friendly deal the last couple seasons. If he puts up big numbers, I don't think it makes sense to re-sign him because he'll get, in theory, would get more elsewhere. And oh, by the way, with Irving, how can you trust him? How would you trust David Irving to give him a big long-term deal when he has clearly shown an inability to play all 16 games? That's going to be a big factor for the Cowboys. We'll stick with the DT talk here. John wants to know, why not just have Crawford slide back into the DT spot? And John, and I see this comment a lot, look, I get it. I think Crawford's best spot is as a 3 technique, that interior disruptive defensive tackle. What's the Cowboys drafted to be after all? But the Cowboys have asked Crawford to cut weight and stay at defensive end. And it's not like the Cowboys were going to be surprised by the Irving suspension. They knew about this one in advance, had been kept quiet, and they still asked Crawford to move to defensive end. That tells me that they're not going to move Crawford back inside. I get the mindset. I would be okay with it, especially if you get Gregory back, but it doesn't seem all that likely. Andrew on Twitter wants to know, are the Cowboys going to play Malik Collins at the 3 technique more because of David Irving's suspension? Andrew, I hope so. Much like Crawford, Malik Collins' ideal spot is as a 3 technique. That's a role I need him to play more. It's his best fit. The Cowboys, though, made him into a 1 technique last year. I don't think it was the best idea. He is not good enough against the run. Hopefully that's the case, but you could see Jihad Ward play some of that role as well. All right, Ron wants to know, does Dalton Schultz have a good chance of being a starter in Week 1? I'll give him a chance, but I don't think it's a good chance. I think you're going to see Jeff Swain potentially be the Week 1 starter. Blake Jarwin not that far behind. Schultz has ability and upside, but I think he's going to take at least a year to kind of get going and before he becomes a true impact player. He'll get a chance to replace Witten at tight end, but if I'm a betting man, and I definitely am, I'm putting my money on Jeff Swain and or Blake Jarwin to fill that role early on in the NFL season for the Cowboys. But I want to know, who should the Cowboys start at tight end this year? Should it be Blake Jarwin, Jeff Swain, Dalton Schultz, or everyone's fan favorite Rico Gathers? We'll get to Rico here in just a little bit, but based on what I've heard from the Cowboys, Blake Jarwin seems to be the guy that they are most excited about. And reminder, they blocked the Eagles from picking him up last year late in the season, putting him to the active roster before the season ended. Cristobal wants to know, what's the deal on Rico Gathers? Why they're not taking advantage of that weapon? Well, a couple different reasons here around Rico. We'll make it the first one here. He's been away from football for a little bit before the OTAs and training camp because he had the head injury last year and wasn't able to practice. Rico was insanely raw coming out of Baylor because he was a basketball player, hadn't played football in years. And the rawness is still there for Rico. The blocking is a big, big concern, and that's the number one reason for the Cowboys. I'm not saying I agree with it, but Dallas wants an all-around, well-rounded tight end because they run the football more than any team in the NFL. Rico right now is not a good blocker. That's a big problem for the Cowboys, and he is firmly behind Swain, Jarwin, and Schultz in terms of reps. He's number 4 right now on the depth chart. I don't know if he's going to make the roster, but the upside is definitely there for Rico. I hope he makes a big impact in the preseason because I want that guy, that big-bodied receiver, in the red zone in particular. I got a kind of a little trade proposal next up here. What about Rico Gathers and David Irving for Earl Thomas? Sign me up for that one. The negative side is it takes 2 to tango and 2 to make a trade here. Why would Seattle do that? I don't think that they want Rico Gathers, and I definitely don't think they want a just suspended DT in exchange for Earl Thomas. They prefer a pick or a younger, more developmental player like a Xavier Woods, for example, even though you guys don't want to trade him away. So I think Seattle says no to this deal. I think the Cowboys would take it in a heartbeat because they move on from Rico and they move on from David Irving, who's been a bit of a headache as well. So Cowboys say yes. Seattle hangs up the phone and says no. God Cypher Divine wants to know, Tom, his question is, are the Cowboys really that comfortable with the safety situation? What do they know that 99% of the world doesn't? And it's a great question because I don't have a great answer for you. I have major concerns about the safety depth chart for the Cowboys. Jeff Heath, Xavier Woods, Kevon Frazier all do differing things well. I think they're all nice number 2, number 3 safeties. There is no Darren Woodson type impact guy. And then you want to carry 4 in theory, and you're looking at guys like Cam Kelly and Tyree Robinson. So I don't get it. If I'm the Cowboys, you got to go get somebody else because you need more depth and talent at the safety spot. Which brings us now to a question here from Cowboy X Factor. Should the Cowboys have looked at the Honey Badger, a.k.a. Tyrann Mathieu, and who would be the best fit between Vaccaro, Reed, and Trey Boston? We'll start with the Honey Badger part. Yeah, they absolutely should have. They made a mistake by having pretty much no interest in him, and it was just a 1-year, $7 million deal. I would have loved that. It would have been a great fit for the Cowboys. Dallas thought he was going to be too expensive, and it kind of came back to bite them in the butt. Or bite them in the butt, excuse me. As for Vaccaro, Reed, Boston, cross off Reed, the Cowboys have no interest there. Trey Boston, a city the Cowboys claim is not a scheme fit, I think absolutely is. They've shown interest in Earl Thomas because they want a true ball hawk at free safety. Boston did that last year for LA. Now, I think there are some concerns about his actual fit as a true every down free safety, but I like his fit. I would go sign him for what should be very cheap. As for my ideal fit, I like Kenny Vaccaro. Now, I think he and Xavier Woods share some similarities because they've both played some slot and some strong and some free safety. And we know the Cowboys have liked him because they nearly dealt for him during the 2017 NFL Draft. Now he's not a scheme fit. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. I am a big Vaccaro fan. I would go sign him in a heartbeat. That would be my number one move if I'm the Cowboys. Bring him in, let him compete with Woods and Heath and Frazier. All of a sudden, it's not a star-stacked group, but it's a quality safety tandem there for the Cowboys. If it's your first time watching the show, folks, subscribe to our brand new Cowboys Report only YouTube channel, chatsports.com/CowboysTV. It'll take you right into the subscribe page there, so please do that today. One last question here. Jordan wants to know, are there any players in the Cowboys roster you could see them trading for other players or draft picks? If you're looking at anyone, I would say maybe a guy like Charles Tapper. There's some depth at defensive end. But Jordan, come back to me around the end of training camp, early in the preseason. We'll have a better feel for that. It'll probably be somebody the Cowboys are going to cut, and they're trying to get some value for as opposed to just losing them for nothing. All right, folks, I'm Tom Downey. Follow me on Twitter at WhatGoingDowney for some more Cowboys coverage. Let's take it now to the latest Cowboys rumors, and we start at quarterback. Are the Cowboys not going to cut Mike White? I'll give this one 3 stars. I very much believe it. A, you got to think of what the Cowboys invested in him. They spent a 5th-round pick on a quarterback. That's a clear sign the Cowboys like Mike White. For example, it's a higher pick than what they spent on Cooper Rush. So if the Cowboys aren't going to cut Mike White, which I do believe this report from Brian brought us, it means they're probably going to carry 3 quarterbacks. It means Mike White and Cooper Rush, and of course, Dak Prescott will all be on the Cowboys roster. White will compete with Rush to be the Cowboys' backup, but I think in year 1, he sits behind Rush, unless Mike White looks really good in the preseason, just like Rush did last year. All right, next rumor is Hurns, the Cowboys' #1 wide receiver. And again, I'm going to give this one the 3 stars here, and it just makes sense. Now, maybe a Cole Beasley can take that role early on. Maybe a Michael Gallup earns it later in the year. But as we sit right now and after OTAs and minicamp are over, I think Hurns is your top guy at receiver. Now, he's not a true #1. I don't think anyone's going to make that argument right now. But he can be a good receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe not the dynamic guy that we saw Dez Bryant in his prime, but Hurns can contribute to the Cowboys for sure and be a reliable receiver for Dak Prescott. We'll stick with the receivers here. Cole Beasley, could he play on the outside? I'm bumping this one up to 3 stars. It was just 2 last time. We reported in the past that the Cowboys have used Cole all around the field, on the outside and on the inside. And Dak said the same thing this week. He thinks that Beasley will be more of an all-around wide receiver, more than just a slot guy. Now, 87% of Cole's snaps last year came from the slot. And if you're going to put Cole outside more, that means guys like Allen Hurns, a Michael Gallup, a Tavon Austin as well, will get reps at the slot position. I think what the Cowboys will do this year more than other years, they are going to shuffle around those receivers and put them all in different spots and move towards a more positionless wide receiver group as opposed to the X and the Y and so on. But, folks, let me know who you think will be the Cowboys' #1 wide receiver. I know some of you guys like Michael Gallup, but as of right now, I'll lean toward Allen Hurns in terms of yards, Cole Beasley in terms of catches, if that's not cheating and a cop-out at all. All right, #4, Ron Parker. Could he come to the Dallas Cowboys? I'm only going to give this the 1 star, and I actually hope it doesn't happen. Now, Parker has been a 4-year starter for the Chiefs before he was released this offseason. I don't find Parker to be all that intriguing. I don't think he's that good of a safety. I thought he benefited in a big way from playing alongside Eric Berry. You took Eric Berry away this year, and Parker struggled even worse than he had in the past. There are better safeties on the free agent market. I am not interested there. I want depth, but I want it to be of a Carr or a Boston or Reed, not a Ron Parker. Speaking of safeties, what about an Earl Thomas trade? ESPN has a trade proposal, which we'll get to here in just a second. But first, we're from our sponsor, The Guild. I'm still just going to give it the 1 star. I don't consider it all that likely, but ESPN has kicked it back up into the rumor sphere when they threw out their best trade package, and it involved 2 draft picks going to the Seahawks. I'll make note in the same article, the Chargers actually offered more than the Cowboys did. Of course, it went along with a contract extension. Here was ESPN's trade proposal. Cowboys, of course, get Earl Thomas. Seattle gets a 3rd-round pick for this year and a 2020 4th-round pick. So they get 2 picks, and again, the minimum is a 3rd-rounder. Seattle will not take less than that because that's what they'll get as a compensatory selection if Earl Thomas leaves. It's an intriguing trade to me. I am curious what you guys think about it, if you would do that trade if you're the Dallas Cowboys. I think I would strongly consider and probably do it. I'm not sure how I feel about trading away 2 picks, but it is Earl Thomas. I'm a big fan of his. And like I mentioned with the Xavier Woods talk that I kind of created and was yelled at for, but that's okay. Thomas is an impact elite player. I am willing to give up more to get that elite type of player there. So I don't know if Seattle would say yes, but I think the Cowboys would. So I lean toward either a heart for neither team saying no, or a wow face for the Seahawks. Speaking of trades, did Aqib Talib want a trade to the Dallas Cowboys? I'm going to go ahead and give this one the 2 stars. Yes and no, because the Cowboys didn't really have much interest, and Talib also wanted to trade to other teams. So it's more in that rumor category. He said that there were 3 teams he'd be wanted to be traded to: Cowboys, Broncos, and the Patriots there. And then, of course, he was later traded as well. The Cowboys, though, didn't show any actual interest in a Talib trade because they simply didn't need more players at cornerback, so it was never really going to be an option. So Talib there was your 6th rumor. We got 3 ones left. You're coming up with, folks. Again, subscribe to our new Cowboys Report YouTube channel at chatsports.com/CowboysTV. All of the best Cowboys coverage all in one spot for you. We'll stick with the secondary here. Is it going to be a breakout year for Chidobe Awuzie? I think it is. I'm going to give it 3 stars, and I almost gave it 4, but I think that's a little bit premature at this point. I think he's going to have a big year for the Cowboys. Pro Football Weekly agreed with me. When he's been healthy, Chido has shown some great ability at the cornerback spot. Now, the injuries are the red flag for me, but I think that Awuzie can have a big season for the Cowboys. If he plays all 16 games, I think you could see Awuzie being an actual #1 cornerback for the Cowboys, like everyone hoped Mo Claiborne was going to be. But, of course, injuries kind of ruined that stage with the Cowboys, and he's still having injury issues with the Jets. Stick on defense here. Could Chris Richard be a future head coach? I'm going to give it 3 stars. I think this is pretty likely. There's been quite a bit of buzz around Richard, and he's already interviewed for head coaching jobs in the past. Before the Seahawks said, okay, bye-bye, go away, because they want to overhaul their entire coaching staff, Richard interviewed for the Colts head coaching job. Now, there is something said about having to interview minority coaches. I think that was a big factor in that. But Richard clearly has interest from the NFL. Maybe it's not with the Cowboys, but Rod Marinelli says there's no question he'll be a head coach. I do think Richard gets that gig. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year or the year after that, but down the road, I do think he'll be a head coach. The question is, will it be with the Dallas Cowboys? I know some of you guys want Richard as the next Cowboys head coach, so let me know in the comments section who you guys want. Is it a Lincoln Riley? Is it a John DeFilippo, who I want, the current Minnesota OC? Or do you want Richard or somebody else? Let me know who in the comments section. All right, number 9. Could the Cowboys host the NFL Combine? I'm going to give it 2 stars, firmly in that rumor category. But the Cowboys unveiled, in partnership with others at the Star, their new sports medical facility. And Stephen Jones made a point to mention, hey, this is not the main reason why we built it, but it was a consideration here, potentially getting the Combine to come to Dallas. Now, it's been at Indy since 1987, and a big reason why is because of the medical facilities around Indianapolis and by Lucas Oil Stadium. With this new medical facility at the Star now, the Cowboys say, hey, NFL, come do it here. The weather's going to be a lot nicer in Dallas in February than it is in Indianapolis. So 2 stars on this one. Keep an eye out for it much further down the road. All right, folks, I'm Tom Downey. Follow me on Twitter at WhatGoingDowney for more Cowboys coverage. If you missed anything on Facebook, including our mailbag, don't worry. We'll play it again here in just a second. But until then, we'll see you next time.